Could you survive if every tool you own broke tomorrow and there was nowhere to buy new ones? What if the stores were empty and no one knew how to fix anything made of metal? Pioneers faced this harsh truth daily. They didn't just survive, they built their world with fire and hammer, creating everything they needed. We're about to show you 10 forgotten secrets of crude blacksmithing. These are the skills that turned raw iron into a working frontier. Get ready to see the real grit of survival. Number 1. Forging basic nails. Today we can buy a box of 1,000 nails for a few bucks. But for a pioneer, every single nail was a small piece of handmade technology. Before factories, you couldn't just build a house, a barn, or even a crate without the local smith. The process was simple but demanding. A smith would heat a thin iron rod until it glowed bright orange, then hammer it on the anvil, carefully drawing the metal out to a sharp point. Once it was the right length, he'd stick the hot rod into a special plate and hammer the end flat, creating the head. It was tough, repetitive work, but these little iron spikes literally held the entire frontier together. But of course, holding wood together is one thing. To build anything useful, you first had to be able to cut it. Number 2. Sharpening farm tools. A dull axe won't chop wood, and a dull hoe won't break ground. For pioneers, keeping tools ready for work was a constant battle. Now, you could just grind a new edge on something, but that method eats away precious metal every single time. A blacksmith had a much smarter way. They'd heat the edge of a tool in the forge until it glowed. Then, with careful hammer blows, they would draw the steel out, reforming a sharp edge without losing material. This meant a family's axe or plowshare could be resharpened for decades. This skill was absolutely vital. A sharp tool could be the difference between a successful harvest and a season of wasted labor. But sharpening an old tool is one thing. What about joining two pieces of metal together with a bond that's almost unbreakable? Number 3. Repairing broken hinges. When you're out on the frontier, you can't just run to the hardware store. A broken hinge on a gate or a barn door was a serious problem. It could mean livestock getting out or your supplies being exposed. The blacksmith was the only person who could truly fix it. They'd get both broken ends of the metal strap glowing hot in the forge. Then, with a few skilled hammer blows, they could actually weld the pieces back together, creating a bond as strong as new. If the part was too far gone, they'd just rivet on a fresh one. This wasn't just a repair, it was keeping the entire homestead functioning. Fixing a hinge kept things secure, but what about a part that had to keep you moving? Number 4. Making horseshoes. You have to remember, a pioneer's horse wasn't just an animal. It was their engine. It was their car and their tractor all in one. Losing your horse could literally be a death sentence, which is why stealing one was often a hanging offense out west. The blacksmith was the mechanic who kept these engines running. They'd take a raw bar of iron, heat it cherry red, and skillfully hammer it into that perfect U shape around the anvil horn. Then they'd create a groove for the nail heads and punch the holes precisely. A single lost shoe could leave a traveler stranded in the middle of nowhere, so being able to forge a new one from scratch was a critical survival skill. But what about the simple tools that held everything else together? Number 5. Building simple knives. On the frontier, a good knife wasn't a luxury. It was your most essential tool. And when one broke, you couldn't just order another. This is where a blacksmith's true resourcefulness came in. They saw potential in every piece of scrap. A broken wagon spring wasn't trash. It was a new blade waiting to be born. Old, worn-out steel files were even better, since they were made of hard steel that could hold a sharp edge. The process was straightforward but vital. Heat the metal, hammer out the blade, and forge the tang, the skinny part that fits into the handle. From a piece of junk, you create a tool that could save your life. A knife is for cutting, but what about making precise holes in wood or metal? Number 6. Hammer welding metal. Today we just grab a welder, but back then, joining two pieces of steel meant forge welding. This wasn't about adding filler material, it was about literally hammering two separate bars into one solid piece. The secret was insane heat. A smith had to get both ends of the metal to a sparkling, almost liquid state where the steel gets sticky. They'd sprinkle on a powder called flux to clean the surfaces, then lay one on top of the other. A few quick hammer blows and the weld was done. A seamless bond just as strong as the original metal. This was how you repaired a snapped wagon axle. But what about when you needed to bend metal into a perfect circle? Number 7. Tempering steel by eye. Forging a tool is one thing, but making sure it doesn't break on the first swing is another. If you just quench hot steel in water, it becomes incredibly hard, but also dangerously brittle. It could shatter like glass. The real craft was in tempering. A pioneer smith would gently reheat the hardened steel, watching the polished surface like a hawk. As the temperature climbed, a thin layer of oxide would form, creating a spectrum of colors. It would shift from a pale straw yellow to brown, then purple, and finally a deep blue. Each color signaled a precise level of toughness. A razor needed one color, a wood chisel another, and a durable spring another. This wasn't a science experiment. It was pure experience, all done by eye. This skill gave tools resilience. But what about creating parts that needed to fit together perfectly, like a nut and bolt? Number 8. Crafting iron hooks and chains. While a nut and bolt need a perfect fit, so does every single link in a chain. On the frontier, hooks and chains were everywhere, used for everything from pulling tree stumps to hauling wagons and lifting heavy loads. Think about the massive 40-horse teams used to move goods. Every piece of that rigging, every hook and chain link, was forged by hand. A single weak link could spell disaster. The process started with a simple iron rod. The smith would heat it, then hammer one end into a point, a technique called drawing a taper. Then they'd bend it over the anvil horn to get that classic hook shape. For a chain, they just did that over and over, linking each new piece through the last one before welding it shut. But what about when you needed a tool that was both strong and precise? Number 9. Maintaining forge fires. You can have the best hammer and the strongest anvil, but without the right fire, you've just got a cold piece of metal. Managing the forge fire was the most fundamental skill of all. For centuries, smiths relied on charcoal. It burned clean and hot, giving them incredible control over the temperature for precise work. But when the Industrial Revolution kicked off in the 1700s, coal became the new go-to fuel. It burned way hotter, which was exactly what they needed to work on the huge iron parts for new machines. But it was a delicate balance. Too little heat and the metal wouldn't move. Too much and you could actually burn the steel, completely ruining the piece you were working on. Controlling the fire was the first step to controlling the steel. But what about the final touches that turned a rough piece of metal into a finished, usable tool? Number 10. Shaping metal without power tools. Getting the final perfect shape wasn't just about hammering away blindly. It took special tools and a whole lot of skill to turn a hot chunk of iron into something useful. Pioneer smiths had a whole toolbox of attachments that fit right into their anvil, like chisels for cutting and fullers for making clean grooves. But one of the cleverest was the swage. This was a block with a specific shape carved into it, like a perfect half circle. A smith would hammer the hot iron into this groove to create a perfectly rounded bar, something that's almost impossible to do with just a hammer. This was how they made complex, consistent parts, all without a single power tool.